Okay, so we just got out of Johnny Somali's third court day here in the beautiful yet rainy Seoul, South Korea. And it's safe to say, last time things went terrible for him, today things went awful. And honestly, kind of embarrassing because a lot of the stuff they did not make sense whatsoever. Clearly, he was way more locked in. He realized how much he screwed up now, it seems like, and he's realizing, uh-oh, I might be stuck in prison for a...
The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Just when many believed Johnny Somali's endless stunts had already reached their ugliest peak, whispers began leaking from inside Seoul's legal corridors. According to these reports, the man whose antics have disgusted locals from Tokyo to Tel Aviv was not simply awaiting trial like any ordinary defendant. He was allegedly plotting a grand escape, attempting to buy his way out of South Korea's grip by handing envelopes of cash to lawyers and even to low-level officials who might delay hearings or quietly clear a path for him out of the country. It was a breathtaking betrayal of the very system he had already mocked for months. The moment this scheme came to light, courtroom air turned electric. Judges postponed proceedings, prosecutors sharpened their case, and the public's anger transformed into fury. In a country that already felt humiliated by his endless provocations, this latest revelation wasn't just scandalous, it was unforgivable.
And that extends the whole trial process by easily 2 to 3 months. So if he just pleaded guilty to that, things would be over pretty quickly. He would get his sentence and he would at least know what his fate is. But now they're deciding to extend the process for no real upside. And by him not pleading guilty, that just makes the sentence even harsher on him.
Inside the court, reporters described a scene of open disbelief. Observers gasped at the suggestion that one arrogant foreign entertainer thought he could simply buy his way out of justice in a nation still scarred by corruption scandals of its own. Social media erupted within minutes. Hashtags demanding life imprisonment trended across Korean platforms, and some citizens even went further, calling for the harshest penalty available under law. For them, this wasn't about a loudmouth prankster anymore. It was about principle, about whether South Korea would be seen as a playground for foreigners who break laws, mock monuments, and then try to slip away by greasing palms. The anger was palpable, visceral, and aimed squarely at Johnny Somali, real name Ramzi Khalid Ismail, who once strutted into court wearing a red campaign hat as though it were a protective shield.
So today, at least he was very serious. So, currently he's facing 8 counts, or 8 charges, and 4 of which are obstruction of businesses, 2 of which are misdemeanors. He pled guilty to all 6 of those charges. Then you have the 2 big charges, which are the deepfakes charges. And the deepfake charges are for distributing the deep...
The fury becomes easier to understand when we consider the long string of offenses that had already piled up. Obstruction of business at a 7-Eleven, vulgar stunts on trains and buses, playing offensive recordings in public places, sometimes with children nearby, deepfake scandals looming in the background, each one darker than the last. And now, on top of everything, the revelation of a secret bribery plot designed to derail justice itself. Was this why his hearings kept getting delayed? Was this why prosecutors struggled to keep up with new filings? South Koreans couldn't help but wonder whether the entire system was being toyed with by a provocateur who thought his foreign passport made him untouchable. If the rumors are true, then his confidence was not arrogance alone. It was calculated, bankrolled, and hidden in plain sight.
Ramzi Khalid Ismail has been hit with a new criminal charge. That's right, as of 2 days ago, on the 25th of July of 2025, we have a new criminal charge for Johnny Somali, aka Ramzi.
The alleged bribery network has become the story behind the story. Because Johnny's not alone, he is part of a generation of nuisance streamers who discovered that East Asia, with its civility, its politeness, and its relative lack of self-defense laws, was the perfect backdrop for their content. Some shout on trains, some disrupt local businesses until the police arrive. But what if behind the shouting and laughing there's something more coordinated? Sources hint that Johnny's escape plan may not have been an isolated fantasy. Foreign prank streamers have reportedly shared tips, contacts, and even lawyers willing to play the gray zones of local systems. Were these the same people who encouraged him to stall his court appearances, to keep streaming in defiance, to believe he could outwit a prosecutor with a 90% conviction rate? The deeper one looks, the more the story begins to feel less like a one-man circus and more like the exposed nerve of a much larger problem.
In fact, we can see this thing go as quickly as going into, let's say, October, November, maybe it could end, or it could go into 2026. It's very, very possible that can happen at this point. It really all depends on how this plays out. And also on how Johnny...
This is where speculation runs wild. Could there already be a covert pipeline of foreign content creators trading in bribes and legal loopholes to avoid accountability? If Johnny Somali was caught mid-escape, how many others might have slipped through unnoticed? Each delay in his case suddenly looks suspicious. His drunken live stream on the eve of trial, his habit of arriving late to hearings. Were these blunders, or were they staged chaos, designed to buy more time while backroom deals were attempted? Prosecutors are not commenting publicly, but the very silence has fed the perception that something much bigger than one reckless streamer might be unraveling. And then there is the strangest, most dangerous rumor of them all. Johnny's repeated fascination with North Korean imagery had always been explained away as trolling, another cheap tactic to enrage South Koreans. He blasted the anthem on buses, he sprinkled his streams with lines praising Pyongyang, and he knew exactly how offensive it would be. But after news of the escape plot, those provocations began to look different. Was he simply mocking, or was he sending signals? Could his antics around the comfort women statues and his references to both Imperial Japan and the North Korean regime be more than shock value performance? Some whispers in Seoul suggest his behavior may have intersected with groups that quietly spread pro-Pyongyang messages online. If so, what looked like crude content for clicks could actually have been part of a destabilization effort. We may never know for certain, but the very possibility is enough to make the hairs on the back of our necks stand up.
A kick streamer is facing 20 years in a South Korean prison after filming himself harassing women, trashing businesses, and disrespecting war.
The unsettling truth is that Johnny Somali has spent years proving himself capable of the outrageous. From atomic bomb jokes in Japan to twerking on memorials in Seoul, his career has been one long dare. That he might escalate from stunts into bribery or even into dealings with sympathizers of the North doesn't feel out of character anymore. It feels like the inevitable next step of a provocateur whose entire brand depends on crossing lines until there are none left. As leaks continue to drip out of the South Korean legal system, we're left asking the same chilling question. How far did this network really go, and who else might be tangled in its shadows?
This is called merging in a charge. It is atypical for this to happen once, but it is completely unprecedented from the people I've talked to, lawyers, others in this process, to see this many merged into the case, which really means they are hitting him and with needles and needles and needles proceed.
And now, with his escape plan shattered in full view of the court, the consequences are no longer hypothetical. They're looming over him like a storm. South Korean prosecutors, who already carried one of the highest conviction rates in the world, suddenly find themselves with more leverage than ever. The story is no longer about obstruction of business or nuisance charges. It has become a diplomatic lightning rod, a question of sovereignty and respect. We've seen the tone shift in Seoul's parliament itself, members calling his antics a national embarrassment, insisting that foreign entertainers who make a mockery of monuments, who provoke locals on public transport, who splash disgrace across live streams, will face punishments designed to send a message. Johnny Somali, once laughing in his red hat, has now become the test case, the one officials point to as the line in the sand. The ripple effects reach far beyond the courtroom. For ordinary South Koreans, the outrage is visceral. For American tourists abroad, it's reputational. We have to be blunt. Johnny Somali has become the face of everything locals resent about Western arrogance. The traveler who thinks foreign soil is a stage, the entertainer who treats sacred memorials as props, the visitor who assumes immunity because of his passport. We cannot ignore how one man's reckless quest for views has reshaped perceptions. Every American tourist in Seoul right now, polite or not, is walking under the shadow he cast. Locals whisper, "Is this another Johnny? Is this another foreigner who thinks they can spit on our history and laugh it off?" That erosion of goodwill is not easily repaired, and officials know it, which is why they are pushing for punishment that will prove South Korea is no one's playground.
So this turd, his name is Johnny Somali. Well, that's not his actual name. His real name is...
And let's be clear, his antics are not isolated. They fit a growing, troubling pattern that analysts have begun to call nuisance tourism. Johnny Somali may be its most notorious face, but he's far from alone. In Japan, foreign streamers routinely barge into subway cars, blast noise, and ridicule commuters. In the Philippines, a Russian-American influencer found himself detained after disruptive pranks spiraled into chaos. These are not cultural exchanges or edgy performances. They are invasions disguised as entertainment. And once Johnny's bribery plot was exposed, governments across Asia began watching each other, realizing they face a common threat. One country's lenience could mean another's streets overrun with thrill-seeking streamers who care nothing for the locals they humiliate.
We have a trend that I called out in the beginning, and I said this would happen, and exactly as I predicted, we are seeing new charges added right before each court date. Every single court date.
The trend is darker than most realize. It's not just about content. It's about exploiting nations whose cultures prioritize patience and politeness, turning those very values into vulnerabilities. Japan banned Johnny after his atomic bomb taunts. Israel turned him away quickly. But South Korea has decided to dig in to fight the battle others brushed aside. In many ways, his trial is not about him at all. It is about whether nuisance tourism will be tolerated as a quirky online fad or treated as the exploitation it truly is. And if South Korea does choose the latter path, we are looking at a punishment far beyond fines or short sentences. We are looking at a signal to the entire world: respect our land, or lose your freedom in it. Think of the timing. His case has collided with rising tensions in the region, with debates over national security laws and with public fury after a string of scandals. This means prosecutors are not negotiating from weakness. They are armed with the mood of the nation. Already, new charges are stacking up like dominoes. Propaganda violations, harassment allegations, the looming specter of text-to-speech pranks that crossed into forbidden territory. Every one of these counts adds weight, and together they form a mountain that no bribery scheme could ever scale. His arrogance has turned into ammunition for his prosecutors. His live streams, his late-night antics, his taunts. Each clip is now evidence.
Once again, for the people out there, this is the sentencing range before today. It changes wildly, and you're going to see it in the best way. And that's the best way for me and those who want Johnny Somali convicted, and the worst way for Johnny Somali after this one is out.
And yet, the whispers persist. Was his bribery plan really a solo act? Or was it part of the shadowy ecosystem of streamers who swap tips on bending laws, who share names of pliant lawyers and crooked facilitators? This is where the story lingers in uncomfortable speculation. If prosecutors follow that trail, we could see more foreigners dragged into court, more careers shattered, more revelations about networks of nuisance creators who believed borders were just another backdrop. The idea alone chills because it suggests this is not about a single man, but about an industry hiding in plain sight. If Johnny falls, he may not fall alone.
Johnny Somali is frequently getting arrested in foreign countries for his on-stream behavior, but they always let him go. With the amount of sentences this guy's avoided.
To understand why Johnny Somali spiraled into this reckless trajectory, we need to consider the psychology of nuisance streaming itself. At its core, this phenomenon is not about comedy, but about validation. Streamers like Johnny build their entire persona on the dopamine hit of outrage. Each shocked face in a subway car, each furious comment in a chat room, each punch thrown by a local who has finally had enough. For them, attention of any kind is currency, and humiliation is simply another form of applause. In this sense, Johnny's behavior reads less like random chaos and more like a compulsive need to provoke, a craving that escalates with every boundary broken. When psychologists analyze narcissistic personalities in the digital age, they often highlight how online platforms reward self-destruction disguised as entertainment. Johnny is a glaring case study. His live streams thrive on confrontation. His identity depends on being hated as much as admired, and he measures his worth in clips that go viral for all the wrong reasons. Each ban from a platform only reinforces his legend among his audience, and each scandal confirms to him that he is untouchable even when handcuffs say otherwise. It's a spiral where shame is no deterrent, because shame, too, is engagement.
So he was living in Japan for a while, and one night he gets drunk and he live streams himself putting on a fake Asian accent, and he starts saying racist things on the subway.
Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we destroy it because you don't know how to behave. You know Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
But is Johnny Somali truly the mastermind of his own downfall, or is he merely a symptom of something far bigger? The internet's culture of clicks and controversy has created a perverse marketplace where disrespect is rewarded more than talent, and cruelty generates more revenue than creativity. Johnny didn't invent nuisance tourism, he perfected it because the algorithm demanded escalation. In this sense, his courtroom fate is not just his own. It's the inevitable result of a system that makes villains into celebrities until the law steps in. There is also the unsettling question of whether he even believes in the chaos he spreads. Does he really hold sympathy for Pyongyang, or are those moments just props designed to spark the maximum backlash? Was his mockery of war memorials rooted in ideology or in the cold calculation that outrage equals views? When we strip away the bravado, we're left with a young man whose entire sense of self seems fused to performance. It's hard to tell where Ramzi Ismail ends and Johnny Somali begins, and that blurring of identity is what makes his story so disturbing.
He's incredibly good at getting out of things. For example, somehow he was able to leave Israel a free man after he was arrested for harassing a military police officer.
Ultimately, examining Johnny Somali's psyche reveals a chilling truth. Nuisance streaming is less about one man and more about the culture that fuels him. For every Johnny caught, there are dozens more testing limits in alleys, on subways, or at sacred sites, hoping to replicate his notoriety. He may sit in a courtroom facing decades, but outside those walls, his rise has already inspired imitators who see punishment not as a warning, but as proof that outrage pays. And that is perhaps the most dangerous legacy of all. The consequences are now global. Governments in Europe are already reviewing nuisance cases at tourist hotspots. Southeast Asian officials are watching Seoul closely, debating whether to impose harsher bans on live streaming in public. And travel agencies whisper that bookings are down, that locals no longer view tourists with open warmth, but with suspicion. Johnny Somali's name may forever be linked not only with outrageous stunts, but with the broader collapse of trust between visitors and hosts. He may be remembered less as a streamer and more as the cautionary tale that shifted tourism policies worldwide.
Anyway, Johnny Somali was arrested partially for his own safety because after days of him streaming himself being incredibly rude and disruptive in South Korea, there were literally hundreds of Asian people on the street, all hunting down a black guy to...
Which brings us to the unspoken but very real possibility: the penalty that awaits him may be severe enough to eclipse anything he ever imagined. South Korea has already signaled that its patience is over. A life sentence is no longer out of the question. And if charges linked to propaganda violations are pressed to their legal limit, whispers of the ultimate punishment hang in the air. Imagine the spectacle. An American streamer who once danced on statues now standing trial with his future measured in decades, or perhaps extinguished altogether. For those who once tuned in for his crude antics, the final act may unfold not online, but in a courtroom that decides whether nuisance tourism has crossed into criminal infamy. So we ask, how far will this go? Will Johnny Somali become the first influencer sentenced not just to prison, but to the harshest punishment South Korea can deliver? And if he falls, will the entire network of nuisance creators he represents come crashing down with him? The stage is set, the outrage is boiling, and the world is watching. Tell us what you think. Will Johnny walk free one day, or is this truly the end of the line for him? Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the biggest drama isn't on the stream, it's in the courtroom.